Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the life of one of history's most iconic figures, Cleopatra. Was she a brilliant political mastermind, a captivating seductress who brought powerful men to their knees, or simply a victim of Roman propaganda? Let's unravel the myth and find the real woman behind the legend. When you hear the name Cleopatra, what comes to mind? Elizabeth Taylor in all her Hollywood glamour. A snake. Maybe you picture a femme fatale using her beauty to manipulate the most powerful men in the world. For centuries, that's the story we've been sold. But what if I told you that image is largely a fabrication, a smear campaign crafted by her enemies to justify their conquest? To understand Cleopatra, we have to go back to Alexandria in 69 BC. She wasn't Egyptian by blood. She was a Ptolemy, a descendant of one of Alexander the Great's generals. The Ptolemaic dynasty had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years, but by the time Cleopatra came to power, the kingdom was in decline, teetering on the edge of being swallowed by the ever-expanding Roman Republic. From a young age, Cleopatra was groomed for power, and she was brilliant. Unlike most of her ancestors who stuck to Greek, she learned to speak Egyptian. In fact, sources say she spoke at least 9 languages. This wasn't just a party trick, it was a powerful political tool. It allowed her to connect directly with her people and foreign dignitaries without needing an interpreter. She was also well-versed in mathematics, philosophy, and astronomy. She was a scholar queen, a ruler who understood that knowledge was power. Her first major political test came when she was just 18. She inherited the throne alongside her younger brother, but court politics are never simple. Forced into exile by her brother's advisors, Cleopatra didn't just accept defeat. This is where we see her strategic genius emerge. She knew she needed a powerful ally, and the most powerful man in the world at that moment was Julius Caesar, who had just arrived in Egypt. Now, we get to the famous carpet story. Legend says she had herself smuggled into the palace, rolled up in a rug, and presented to Caesar. While it makes for great drama, the real story is even more telling. Whether it was a carpet or a linen sack, this was a calculated risk. It was a bold, audacious move designed to bypass her enemies and gain a direct audience with Caesar. It showcased her courage and her flair for the dramatic, qualities that would define her reign. Caesar was impressed, not just by her boldness, but by her intellect and political savvy. He saw in her a capable and reliable ruler for Egypt, a crucial breadbasket for Rome. Their alliance was both personal and political. Yes, they became lovers and had a son, Caesarion, but this wasn't just a romance. For Cleopatra, it secured her throne and protected Egypt's independence. For Caesar, it stabilized a critical region and provided him with Egypt's immense wealth to fund his ambitions. She wasn't just his mistress, she was his political partner. She even traveled to Rome, not as a conquered queen, but as an allied monarch. The Romans were both fascinated and horrified. Here was this powerful, intelligent foreign woman living openly with their leader. Roman society was deeply patriarchal. Powerful women were seen as a threat. This is where the first seeds of the seductress narrative were planted by her political rivals, like Cicero, who saw her as a dangerous influence. After Caesar's assassination, the Roman world was thrown into chaos. Cleopatra had to navigate a new political minefield. She returned to Egypt and waited. Her moment came when another powerful Roman, Mark Antony, summoned her to Tarsus. Antony, one of Caesar's successors, needed Egypt's resources for his planned invasion of Parthia. Cleopatra knew the power of a first impression. Instead of arriving as a supplicant, she sailed up the Kidnus River in a magnificent golden barge, dressed as the goddess Venus, or Aphrodite. The air was filled with perfume, and her attendants were dressed as nymphs and cupids. Antony, who fancied himself a descendant of Hercules, was completely captivated. He had summoned a queen, but a goddess had arrived. Again, this wasn't just seduction for its own sake, it was masterful political theater. She established herself not as his subject, but as his equal, a divine figure worthy of his respect. Their alliance became the most defining relationship of her life. They were a true power couple. They had 3 children together and ruled the eastern Mediterranean from Alexandria, which they envisioned as the new capital of a Hellenistic empire. They held a grand ceremony called the Donations of Alexandria, where they declared their children rulers of vast territories. To the Romans back in Rome, this was an outrage. It looked like Antony was giving away Roman land to a foreign queen and her children. Octavian, Antony's rival in Rome and Caesar's adopted son, seized on this. He launched a vicious propaganda war, painting Cleopatra as a decadent, power-hungry sorceress who had bewitched Antony and planned to conquer Rome itself. He portrayed Antony as a weak, un-Roman man who had abandoned his virtuous Roman wife Octavian's own sister for this foreign temptress. This propaganda was incredibly effective. It wasn't a war against Antony, a fellow Roman. It was a holy war to save Rome from a dangerous foreign queen. The narrative was set, and it has stuck for 2,000 years. The final showdown came at the naval battle of Actium. In 31 BC, the battle was a disaster for Antony and Cleopatra. Their fleet was defeated, and they fled back to Egypt. Octavian followed, and the end was near. Antony, mistakenly believing Cleopatra was already dead, took his own life. Cleopatra was captured. Octavian intended to parade her through the streets of Rome in chains, the ultimate symbol of his victory. But Cleopatra would not be humiliated. She was a queen, a descendant of Alexander the Great. She had ruled as a living goddess. Being paraded as a prisoner was a fate worse than death. In her final act of defiance, she took her own life. The popular story says it was an asp, a venomous snake, smuggled to her in a basket of figs. The snake was a symbol of Egyptian royalty and divinity, so this method, if true, was a final, powerful statement of her identity. She died a queen, on her own terms. So, let's go back to our original question. Was she a genius, a seductress, or a victim? The truth is, she was all 3. She was a political genius who used every tool at her disposal: her intellect, her wealth, her charm, and yes, her sexuality to protect her kingdom in a world dominated by ruthless men. The Seductress label is largely a product of Roman propaganda, a misogynistic caricature created by her enemies to diminish her accomplishments and justify their actions. She was a victim of history, written by the victors. Octavian, who became the Emperor Augustus, ensured that his version of the story was the one that survived, but a victim is not all she was. Cleopatra was a brilliant, multilingual, and politically astute ruler who held one of the world's greatest powers at bay for over 2 decades. She was the last active pharaoh of Egypt, and her death marked the end of an era. It is time we look past the Roman smears and Hollywood fantasies and see her for who she truly was, a formidable leader fighting for her people and her legacy. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts on Cleopatra in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching.